How are you, dude? Welcome back.
Thank you. We sat down with an awesome guest this week. His name is Ari Blau.
Right?
Who is Ari Blau? Maybe people don't know him.
What a yid.
If you do know him, then maybe you watch too much TV. I don't know. Just saying. He used to work in late night. He used to work in the show business. He worked for James Corden, Jimmy Fallon, Jon Stewart. And now he's learning in the Mir full time. Hate to ruin the story for you, but you're going to hear so much part of this.
That's not living. He's like ligging in sugyas. He was like,
I don't know what ligging means.
He was like pulling Nachi and I to come join him in the sugyas in Yevamis.
Yeah, he was.
He's learning Yevamis now in the Mir, and he's like, guys, this is where it's at. Get over here.
Absolutely. We want to thank a sponsor for this episode, which is, again, Isaac Newman.
Isaac Newman, how are you doing?
For sponsoring this episode. L'zecher nishmas mother.
Yes.
I said mother. What? I'm not from Brooklyn even. Why did I say mother? Why did I say mother?
You're feeling the Brooklyn vibes right now.
I don't know what's going on.
The New York vibes. Forget about it.
I don't know. But anyways, we want to say this episode is Zecher Nishmas his mother. Ruchama, Perel, Malka, Leah, Bas, Aryeh, Leib, Neshama, Shev, and Leah. All the inspiration derived from this episode should be an Aliyah for Neshama.
Amen.
Of course, a big shout out to our friends at Agra de Pirka.
Interesting.
Right now, it's that morning time right now where we're doing this, but maybe you should be learning right now. Maybe we should be learning right now.
Right here, right now, Agra de Pirka. Someone asked me in my shul this morning, when is Agra de Pirka starting in North Woodmere?
Yeah.
It's a very good question.
Well, you know what you have to do, right?
You have to sort of be learning in the morning.
You have to sort of head to agradepirka.org.
Interesting.
I think, right?
Yeah, or call the number.
Which is in the show notes, in the description. So you want to have that chabura in your community? It's very simple. Call them.
You don't have to be retired, by the way. I heard that. It's not like it's not specifically for retirees.
Not. Absolutely not.
It's for people that are willing.
You're very much not retired.
Exactly. It's for people that are willing to just prioritize a few hours of the day.
Absolutely.
And just learn.
Yeah. And another big shout out to our friends at Vayima'in. This WhatsApp line where you can receive videos that discuss Shmir Einayim, how important it is. It's a good step. You're watching us instead of some other schmutz, like, I don't know, God knows what, like James Corden. But you know what? That's one step in the right direction. The next step is signing up for Vayima'in. You could hit the link in the description, the show notes to this episode.
I felt bad that I missed the last ad.
I know.
I wasn't in the studio the last time that
we did Vayima'in.
Shout out to Vayima'in went out. And I know some of the people that are behind it.
Good people?
Very good people. Shout out to my nephew, David Schwab.
Oh, David Schwab.
Yeah, dude.
Killer first baseman, by the way.
Who is very close with some of the forces behind Vayima'in.
Yeah.
And they're doing such beautiful work. If anyone has seen the videos that they're producing,
high quality,
absolute class act, class A, premium content, and the message that they're delivering about just living a tefach hecher, just living in this world a little bit higher.
Hecher. A little bit higher. Do you know what?
Legit.
It's going to make our audience higher.
It'll lift you up.
Yeah, that will lift you up.
It'll lift you up to know that you could walk around in today's day and age and you do not need to be in the gutter. You just don't have to be.
You'll feel elevated. And what will also make you feel elevated is if you just watch the rest of this episode. So enjoy. You are listening to the Meaningful People Podcast.
The podcast featuring our nation's most impactful, influential,
and meaningful people. Ha! We got you.
Ooh, false start on the offense.
You thought we were going to go right to the episode, but Momo forgot something.
Yes, I failed to mention a massive thank you to Sarah Fleischman we spent Pesach together last year. So sometimes episodes take a while in the making.
Yes.
Last Pesach, Sarah Fleischman mentioned Ari Blau and how he would be such an awesome guest on the Meaningful People podcast. And she made it happen.
And here we are.
She made the intro. She got the right contact information.
And Ari's just like waiting for us to finish this.
Legit.
To start talking.
Legit.
That's how it goes. What else?
Thank you very much, Sarah. Also, shout out to Eliezer Sarabrowski.
Yeah.
For your donation.
To the Shasathon. Momo is going tomorrow, if you're listening about the Shabbos, to go learn. If you didn't donate yet, go donate. We'll put the link in the description of the show notes.
Sure. But really, thank you to everyone that participated in this campaign.
You rock.
For Hesky and I, we're really looking forward to the Shasathon. When this airs, it'll be tomorrow morning. We'll be learning through Shas together with a bunch of Yidden and making a Siyam Shas in the evening.
It's so
Thank you, everyone, for participating.
It's so hecher. Anyways, now you can actually enjoy this episode. Reb Ari Blau, it's so nice for you to join us. Although you're 6,000 miles away, but I feel like you're sitting right next to us. So thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Welcome.
So let's jump right in. You grew up in Cape May, New Jersey.
Yes.
What in the world is that? Like, how many Jews live in Cape May?
There are 0 Jews in Cape. Well, my sister still lives there, so there's 1 Jew in Cape May still.
Shout out to her holding down the fort.
Yes.
Look at that.
She's holding it down, but it's still not enough, unfortunately, for the Chabad to go there. There's no Chabad in Cape May, and that's a clear raya to the amount of Jews that actually live there.
When you were growing up there, was it more than just your family, or were there other religious Jews, or was it more, let's say, conservative reform type of community?
There was maybe like one other like reformed, family here or there. There used to be a synagogue in a neighboring town of Cape May called Wildwood, New Jersey, which is no longer around. But we were really the only Jewish family in Cape May growing up.
That's awesome. How far was Cape May from Lakewood?
Cape May from Lakewood's about an hour and 45 minutes.
Uh-huh.
That's a geographic distance.
Pretty far.
Yeah.
It's a geographic distance. So, we're very excited to have you on Meaningful People. Your story is one that's been told many times, and Momo actually brought you to my attention as a potential guest many months ago. And so we'd love to really start, from the beginning.
Because I'm from Los Angeles.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
Momo was a big movie.
Yeah.
I mean, Momo's
I
previous
grew up
life
looking at the Hollywood sign.
was
Okay,
a
wow.
movie star.
Wow.
So we'd love to start, I guess, from the early years, from the beginning of Ari Blau's life, and take us through that.
Sure. So as we started off with, I grew up in Cape May, New Jersey, and for those of you who don't know, Cape May is the farthest south you can go in the state, mile marker 0 on the Parkway. And I grew up in a conservative Jewish home. I have an older brother and 2 younger sisters. And Cape May it's a beach town. It's a summer resort beach town. So in the summer, the amount of people that come is triple the amount of people that actually live there year round, probably. And so it was fun. You grew up going to the beach, and I was very much into animals growing up. Actually, my Bar Mitzvah theme was "Come Safari with Ari." Not many people know that.
Come Safari with Ari. What type of, I feel like I had like a
That was a layup.
That was a layup. What type of animals? I'm just curious.
I was into all types of animals. I had a lot of animals, actually.
Really?
I had a lot of lizards.
No way. I had a gecko growing up.
You had a gecko. What kind of gecko? Do you know? Was it a leopard gecko?
What are the other? You gotta give me multiple choice. I was never good at freestanding questions.
It was a leopard gecko, a fat-tailed gecko. There was a
Geico gecko.
Yeah, Geico gecko.
I think it was inspired. I think I was inspired by the commercials when I got it. I got one, and then I got another one. And then, to be honest, I don't know whatever happened to them. I think I went away one summer and my mother gave it away.
I have to take this opportunity to give a shout out to Mr. Chesky Cohn, who's a friend of my father-in-law, who I spent the weekend with. We were talking about Geico over the weekend.
Yeah.
And just casually, like one of the advertisements that insurance companies are very clever with came up, and I referenced it as a Progressive ad.
Yeah.
And he was like, no, it's a Geico ad.
No.
And I was like, no, I'm pretty sure it's a Progressive ad.
And then you guys had a fist fight.
And then, no, and he's like, we can make this interesting. And I'm like, are you serious? He's like, yeah. And I'm like, well, I happen to be participating in the Shasathon this coming weekend. And like, I'm sure, like, if you're wrong, you might be inspired to donate even more to my campaign. And he's like, yeah, and he goes all in.
You went all in on Geico, and you went all in on
Geico. I was all in on Progressive.
It's a simple answer. One is Flo and one is a lizard.
Right, but this is the beauty of Shabbos, by the way, because otherwise, by the time you finish the conversation, someone's on their phone Googling it, right?
Right.
And Motzei Shabbos, he gave a very generous donation.
Because he was wrong.
Yeah.
It's a nice way of you saying he
amazing.
was wrong. Okay, so you had lizards. I also had a turtle once, and I'm pretty sure I also turned into turtle soup. My painter one day just...
I had lizards. I actually bred the lizards, and I sold the baby lizards to pet shops. I had a whole business growing up.
Is that legal? Like
I heard you sold the original gecko to Geico.
Is that true?
What'd you ask, Nachi?
I said, is that legal? So like, you had like a little lizard ring going on, and you were selling them.
Yeah. At 10 years old, I went in. First I bought these 2 lizards from the pet store. It's called Bob's Pet Shop, and then the female. I didn't know there was a male or female at the time, and then the female just laid eggs. So then I went and got a book from the library on what do I do with these eggs. So I have to get an incubator. So now I had to go find a place where you get an incubator.
You're still in the true story part of this story, right?
I am in the true story. This is the truest part of the story.
This is at 10 years old?
At 10 years old, I was breeding, they're called bearded dragons. And then they had babies. I don't think my mom didn't think the eggs were really going to hatch. It takes 7 months for the eggs to actually hatch. So
and then one day.
And you're like, you want to make this interesting?
I was going on a field trip, I think to Virginia. And I said, Mom, the eggs are supposed to hatch this week. They could hatch while I'm in Virginia. And she said, oh, okay, sure. I don't think she really believed it, but she was very supportive. And she calls me, she called the teacher running the trip. And she said, the eggs are really hatching right now. I don't know what to do.
That's incredible. Put Ari on the phone.
Yeah.
And you're like, put a blanket over them.
Safari with Ari began right there.
Yeah, I really, when I woke up this morning, I didn't envision us talking about lizards and eggs hatching, but this is life. This is life.
Yeah,
so you're into animals at 10. Yep. And then, keep us going past the safari with Ari.
And then I went to a Jewish conservative day school growing up. It was near Atlantic City, New Jersey. My mom was an English teacher at the school, and she was a librarian at the school. And so we used to carpool with her. It was about a 40-minute drive in the morning. We'd all wake up, we get in the car, drive with her there, and it had mixed boys, girls at the school. Half the day was Jewish Judaic studies, and the other half was your secular studies. And I remember around 12 years old when I started studying for my Bar Mitzvah parsha. A lot of people started telling me, Ari, when you have your bar mitzvah, that's when you become a man, and that's when things matter. And my uncles would say this, or, older friends of mine, would tell me after they had their bar mitzvah, things matter when you become a bar mitzvah, you become a man. And I really didn't know what that meant, and I don't think many people who were telling me knew either. No offense to them, but I would ask them, and there was no real elaboration on the matter. So I remember asking my my rabbi that I was studying with at the synagogue that I was going to, because I started to get nervous. I was like, well, what's going to happen in another few months? and I asked, what happens when you have your bar mitzvah, that now things matter? And so she told me, she said to me, as long as Ari, you're a good person in life, that's really all that God cares about. Just be a good person, and God will be happy. And I knew as I was hearing this coming out of her mouth that it can't be that that's true, because what I think is good is different than what my friends think is good, and it's different than what my older brother, my younger sisters. Everybody has a different definition. If we're going after the individual person of what's good. So I knew that couldn't be, a true statement. I just didn't know what to do, who to turn to. And there were these teachers that, what'd you ask?
No, I want to interject. I heard once that when Rav Pam was a young boy, he used to learn with an older person, whether if it was an older bacher or someone in Kollel, and he asked him a theoretical question. He said, if you could be granted any one of the brachas of Kiddush HaChodesh, when we bring in the new month on Shabbos, if you could be granted any one of the brachas from that tefillah, which one would you choose? And he said, Avos Torah v'Yirah. That's what he said as a child. So the older person was trying to it was like a riddle. He said, but why wouldn't you ask for Yimale Hashem Kol Mishales Libeinu L'Tova? And then it's like asking the genie for 1,000 wishes, right? You can get whatever you want if you get that one. So he said, without Avos Torah and Yerushalyim, I wouldn't know what to ask for.
Wow.
It's too early for this holiness, Momo.
I'm still holding after Rav Elephant, my Rebbe, Shlita, a shir on Eishes Achtem Amela and Yavama. So I'm holding. Thank you. I really liked it. I know by you, it's 8:15, 8:20 a.m. But
right for our listeners, Ari's in the Holy Land, and we're not yet in the Holy Land.
Yes. So then I imagine as a 13-year-old, you're kind of confused. You ask your rabbi, and she's telling you just be a good person, and you had this sort of intuition like that doesn't seem like it's going to be enough, right?
Yeah, I just knew that good, if it's determined by me, if that's what she's saying, it's subjective to what I think. There has to be some objective overall good. But I didn't know exactly how to articulate that. I didn't know what to do with these feelings. And there were these teachers at the school that were coming down to teach the Judaic studies from Lakewood. I didn't know what Lakewood was. I had no idea, that...
None of us really know what Lakewood is, to be honest. But,
erroneous. I'm going to throw an erroneous in there.
I'm going to get killed for that. Yeah, go on.
And so the editor will cut that part out, Nachi. It's okay.
Will he, though? Will he, though?
This really kind of likes to get me canceled, but it's okay. Yeah, go on.
And so there was a certain Mora, a certain teacher there that I, was close with. And I asked her, I asked her this question and how I was feeling. And she said, why don't you go ask your mom if you can come to Lakewood for Shabbos? So I went and asked my mom. My mom was like, yeah, sure. What's the big deal? Go to Lakewood. And so I went to Lakewood for Shabbos, 12 years old. And the whole Shabbos experience really just blew me away. I know, like, when I say this sometimes when I'm talking, especially to people who are from Lakewood, they look at me like, I have 6 heads when I say that I was, inspired when I went as a 12-year-old boy to Lakewood, and they're like, I'm trying, to get out, or, I don't know what the big deal was. But for me, coming from the background that I was coming from, and my experience, even though my family was, keeping holidays and keeping Shabbat in the way that we could, and we for sure did, Hanukkah and a Passover Seder, and, we had, a Shabbat meal. My mom definitely lit, candles and lit the Neiros. But going to Lakewood for that Shabbos, I really realized that there was a whole other world that I, wasn't exposed to. And I was really drawn into it from the first Shabbos that I went.
So Lakewood for Shabbos. It's so funny. Ironically, I just spent my first Shabbos in Lakewood.
First Shabbos in Lakewood?
Shabbos. Last week.
Menachem Mendel.
For the first time ever.
How are you, dude?
I went to my sister-in-law, my brother-in-law. For the first time ever, I spent Shabbos in Lakewood. Prior, I've never been to Lakewood other than for a wedding. And I've only been so it was my first time there. Incredible place. Very Jewish. A lot of people. Yeah, a lot of Jews. How was your experience for Shabbos in Lakewood?
For me, it was very inspiring. Like I said, I remember that night, Shabbos night, I went and davened. I think we went to the BMG. I had no idea. I still don't, I haven't been inside the BMG before, but, coming from the background that I was coming from, I remember walking in with, the rabbi, and I just saw like a sea of these black hats, white shirts. And really what caught my attention more than that was that for the first time I really saw people praying.
Really?
At my synagogue, once again, I'm not putting them down, no offense, but I'm just stating the facts of what it was like from my point of view growing up. There was definitely, the Shabbat services, and they had somebody that, changed the number every now and then up in the front
to remind people,
what page we were on.
I kind of wish the Frum Shuls would do that, though. Like, that's one thing I think.
It's a great public service.
I really think that the Frum Shuls should do that. The page number thing is good to adopt.
It really is. But I want to highlight, by the way, that you're describing this experience in Lakewood.
Yeah.
And I am sure that for every one of those people that comprised that sea of black hats and white shirts that went to BMG to daven that Leil Shabbos, they, in their own process, they weren't doing anything that was seeking to inspire or to change someone's life or to make the type of impression that it had on you. They were just doing their thing on a Friday night. And it's such a beautiful thing to just step back and highlight for a second that when we just do our avodah on a consistent basis, that has an impression on the world. It has an impression on people that experience that maybe for the first time. It's such a powerful position to be in, just as from people.
I couldn't agree more. It's so important. We never know who's watching, and that definitely had an effect on me to just see that people were there praying, and they had no idea probably that I was even standing behind them. But
right.
look what impression it did. It's unbelievable.
So 13-year-old Ari Blau steps in the BMG, and how do you walk out?
The BMG. I love how you added the.
Yeah,
because it is the. It
sounds
is
like
the
KGB, no? Like
it is the BMG.
The BMG. So like, was that an instant life changer? Did you go home and start saying, "Hey, you know what? Now I'm keeping Shabbos," or was it, a long game?
I went back after that Shabbos. The whole Shabbos was, like I said, an amazing experience. Just seeing a real Shabbos Suda, and people really disconnected from what they do during the week. And so I remember going home, and then I asked my mom if I could go back again for another Shabbos. And I started going back like every other week or so. And I started wearing tzitzis and this big rainbow kippah on my head. I had, got this rainbow kippah that I used to wear even outside of school. And then I told my mom that I wanted to keep kosher, which our house, we never had, non-kosher food in the house, but, we grew up, we ate out at the diner. We would go out to a restaurant here or there. And I remember telling my mom, I really want to keep kosher, the right way, the only way to keep kosher. And she was very supportive, unbelievable. My mom's great. She would take me when I would go out to eat with her and my siblings, and she would get me kosher food and bring it on like a paper plate with plastic,
Wow.
knife and spoon,
Really?
and fork, and the whole thing. She was super supportive, which is very special.
But you had a very strong conviction for a young child at that point to say, you know what, even if my family is going out and eating anything, I'm going to eat kosher no matter what. Now, where was that constant inspiration or conviction? Where'd that come from?
It's a great question. I think from a little boy, like like I said, my mom was a teacher, and outside of school, even in, our daily life, she's a teacher. All parents are teachers. And one thing I remember my mom always trying to convey a message in the home was a message that you just want to do the right thing. And so I think that clicked in me, like, well, this is the right thing. This is what the Torah says that we should be doing, even though that it was a contradiction to what, my siblings were doing, or even if my mom herself wasn't doing it. I just felt like, as a person, as myself, if it's right, it's right. If it's wrong, it's wrong. And so, as a 12-year-old, 13-year-old boy, that's the decision I had made up in my mind.
How'd you balance that? Were you had you not, I guess, judge your mother or judge your siblings for not, keeping up to your standards and your journey?
I think, and at the time, I don't think I really, thought about it so much that they weren't doing. I didn't even look at them in the light that they're not doing what I'm doing or they're doing something wrong. I just thought that I'm doing. If somebody else didn't come to their own conclusion that it's correct, I didn't feel like it would be right for me to then, push it on to them.
Right.
They didn't have this experience going to Lakewood like I did. And even if they did, who knows what an effect it would have had on them.
Right.
And so I think it's a very important thing just in life in general that, we never know, 10 people can walk into a movie, or 10 people can go on a kiruv trip, or 10 people can hear a shir from a rav, and everybody can take out what they take out from
Right.
it on different levels. And we never can judge what other people feel and what other people take
Sure.
on.
For sure. I'm curious, as you're having these experiences in Lakewood and adopting different aspects of Frumkeit, like starting with kosher and going there for Shabbos, was there someone or some force within the other side, like in Lakewood, in the Frum community, that was sort of driving your experiences? Like, how'd you get around Lakewood? How'd you know how to get into BMG?
So there was this Mora that I told you that taught at my school, and every time I went, I stayed with her and her family, and
Oh, okay.
and so
Awesome.
her her husband was very, well connected. Obviously, they still, I visited them. About 4 or 5 years ago, I went to see them. I hadn't seen them since I was 12. Wow. But my wife and I went back to Lakewood, and I introduced her, to this Mora and her husband, the Rav, and every time I went, I was staying at their house. So they definitely were influential, and they were never, pushing me or suggesting that I should take on anything. And it was just me deciding, that I didn't want to do something. And then I got to a point where I started to learn that there was a thing called yeshiva. And I was in 8th grade. I had my bar mitzvah at that point, and I really wanted to go and learn in a yeshiva for high school. So there was a couple options that I was deciding, but none of them were near Cape May, New Jersey. They were all, right. The ones that I was looking at were, going to be in places where I would have had to move and either, dorm or live with somebody. I was looking at a place in Philadelphia at the time. And I had mentioned it to my mom, and she was also supportive that I could do it if I wanted to. And I even had a couple friends from this Jewish day school growing up who were going to be going to yeshiva. My friends Ben and Izzy were their names. And I wanted to go along with them. But
sounds like the name of a morning show.
Yeah,
Ben and Izzy in the
morning. And I was 13 years old. I really wanted to go, but it was around that time that my parents, who had already been, they got divorced when I was 10, but I still saw my father growing up. We had visitation, we would see him, but at 13 years old, shortly after my bar mitzvah, he disappeared. I haven't seen him or talked to him since. I have no tainas against him. We all have certain, nisyonos that, tests that Hashem decides, or we decide, how, before we come down here, we pick the package that, we know will be best for us. And that was a test that Hashem gave me. But it was difficult. I'm not going to, downplay it. At 13 years old, for my father to up and leave, I felt like I can't now go to yeshiva. I'm going to move away. My mom was very hard on her. She's going to be raising 4 of us alone. I have 2 younger sisters to help take care of. I have to be home. I have to help out around the house. Yeah. So
can I ask you to elaborate
Sure.
on that, just that perspective, because it sounds like it's the result of some very meaningful work, because that is a very difficult predicament for a 13-year-old child to be in, and for you to very matter-of-factly state that very healthy, mature perspective. Work goes into that. Can you share with our listeners what that looks like?
For sure. A lot of work goes into something like this. It's not something that happens overnight. But I remember I used to keep a journal when I was a little boy. Someone got me a blank leather bound, journal with a pen that had my name on it for my bar mitzvah as a present. And so I used to write in it every now and then, my thoughts. I can't say I wrote in it every single day, dear diary, but I wrote things that I thought maybe I would be able to maybe reflect on later on in life, how I was feeling at the moment. And it was a very fitting time for me to get that journal at that time when my dad left, because I really started documenting it, and I still have the journal. And when he left, I definitely was distraught. I was, sad. How could this happen? How could you do this? You brought us into this world, and now you're up and leaving, and why? Have a lot of confusion. My mom, in a very healthy manner, she took, us to counseling. She herself was an open book. I think it's very important that my mom never once spoke negatively about my dad growing up. She didn't say anything. She took on an unbelievable burden. Not that the children were a burden, but just now that she was working 2 jobs to make income, and always had dinner on the table. And even though she was definitely hurting inside, I don't remember seeing my mom cry growing up. A couple of times here and there, but in a healthy manner. She put on the best that she could for us. And I remember as a child, I realized that I can keep living my life being upset that this is, the hand that I was dealt, or I can say that this is the situation, and now what can I make of it? Right. And through time, I realized that, I don't want to let this drag me down. I want to be, the best version of myself that I can be. One day I want to get married and be the best husband that I can be, which is a work in progress every day. And I want to be the best Abba, that I can be one day, which is always a work in progress every day. But I can't let this, if I let this drag me down, I'm never going to be able to get where I want to be. And so it was a lot of hard work, but I eventually, Baruch Hashem, came to the conclusion that, like I said, I have no tainas against my dad. I wish him well wherever he is in this world. If he's watching this podcast, you never know. He should live and be well. But I think it's important for everybody to realize that we don't, we only control one thing in this world, and that's our mindset to the situation. And so if we can sit back and we can realize that we have really zero control over anything. I don't control my dad making a decision. You don't control this, that. All we control is, our perspective. And if we can remind ourselves of that, it's very difficult. I'm saying something that's I don't do all the time. I'm for sure not doing this, in every single situation. But if we can remind ourselves beforehand, before, a tragedy or something happens, then I think you have somewhat of the tools to get through it.
That's really incredible. And, I guess just going back to the timeline of things. So you made that decision that heading to yeshiva right now is not going to be the best thing for you or the best thing for your family. And I guess you stay put. Did you go to public school at that point?
I did. I went to a public high school in Cape May. It's called a Lower Township. They have two different high schools. I went to Lower Township, and I was in for a rude awakening, to say the least. I remember walking in the first day. I still had this big rainbow kippah on my head, and I had tzitzis out, and I brought a lunchbox with me. I would have gotten beaten up just for the lunchbox, you should know. That's like grounds for, what was I thinking bringing a hardcover lunchbox to public school as a freshman in high school?
Wow. Yeah, that probably wasn't a great idea, Ari.
No. If anybody is listening, take my advice. Don't bring the hardcover lunchbox to high school.
I don't think it's a thing anymore, lunchboxes. Are they? Your kids have lunchboxes?
I don't think they have lunchboxes.
No, it used to be a thing. It's not a thing anymore. I think too many kids got beaten up for it, maybe.
If I could reach it, I can't right now, but my lunchbox is off to the side. I still have it. I have a soft cover now. Baruch Hashem, nobody at the Mir has beaten me up for the soft cover lunchbox. Oh, wow. But I have gotten a couple looks.
Not yet.
Not yet. I've gotten a couple looks, and they asked me, "What's that for? Why don't you eat the lunch here at the Mir?" I say, nothing's wrong with the Mir lunch, but I'd rather eat my wife's food if she's sending it, and she, happily sends me every morning with a nice cold ice pack and a beautiful lunch. So shout out to her.
That's awesome. So so you rough time, I guess, in public school, and then I for the people who are listening right now, as we're going through this story, who you are right now, sitting here at that moment, didn't just zoom into that. There's a whole other world that you went into, and I'm curious, sort of how that happened. I guess you got through high school, and you had an affinity towards a certain field, a certain industry.
Yeah, I got, I was attracted to filmmaking and really comedy before filmmaking. In high school, like I said, I was getting bullied, and it was the fourth day of school. I was actually contemplating eating lunch in one of the stalls in the bathroom, because it's brutal. You go into a cafeteria with 500 students, nobody wants you to sit with them, and everybody's teasing you. I had taken off the kippah and the tzitzis at that point, but they know that you're the only Jew in the school. I had pennies thrown at me. Swastikas were drawn on my locker. And I had a friend of mine who came up to me. He's still one of my best friends still today. And I made friends with the only 10 black kids in the whole school. His name was Dante. Dante came over to me, like I said, the fourth day of school, and he said, "Hey, yo, I saw that you had that hat on your head the other day. And they were teasing you and making fun of you and saying they're going to beat you up. you should know something. They also make fun of us because of our skin color. The difference is we beat them up. So I said, great. He said, you could sit with us at lunch. And
That's
I
so
sat with
nice.
them at lunch. And these were really...
That's beautiful.
Hashem sent me, these 10 malachim in high school. If it wasn't for them, I don't know how I'd get through. But I also, by the way, Dante really did beat people up, I don't know if there's something called house arrest where you have an ankle bracelet and you really can only go to school and then home. With a probation officer. And, he broke somebody's jaw protecting me. So,
wow. And the house arrest is pretty popular in the white collar crime division as well. But that's awesome that he defended you like that.
Yeah, it was. I brought them over for a Shabbat meal once. I told my mom, "Can I bring my friends over?" A couple weeks into school, and she said, "Sure." And they all came over wearing like long Tracy McGrady and Kobe Bryant jerseys and do rags. And my mom didn't know they were black. She's not racist. She saw them like, wow, like these are your friends Ari's been talking so much about. And they sat down. I said Kiddush that night, and they were like listening intently. And then afterwards, I gave them a little shot glass of Kedem grape juice, and they drank it. And I told them, and now you're all Jewish. And they were like, yeah.
That's great. By the way, it sounds like they played a major role in your sort of leaning into your frumkeit and leaning into your Judaism. Made you sort of say, you know what, this is fine, this is good. They gave you permission.
They definitely gave me permission. I stopped wearing the kippah and the tzitzis in school, and obviously you get a new group of friends, and over time I stopped, anything I had taken on from my time in Lakewood slowly dissipated. I wasn't, keeping, Shabbos. I was, going out with them Friday night. I never ate meat out. I can say I never ate, non-kosher meat. I never ate meat and cheese, never had, bacon. Certain things I still held on to. But they definitely did make it that I was proud, at least, to be Jewish, and I wasn't hiding it, while I was in high school. And that was the time when I really started to develop, I guess, a sense of humor. When people make fun of you
after you made them Jewish.
Yeah, after I made Dante and Nico and Dubat, that's his real name, Dubat. That's the name his mother gave him.
God bless her and her family.
Yes, they should live and be well, Dubat and his mishpacha. But after I started to really watch a lot of Adam Sandler movies. And I remember thinking to myself, wait a second, here is, a Jewish guy, and he makes movies with really the same group of friends. And actually, every plot is pretty much the same thing. It's the same story over and over again. Adam Sandler pretending that he's not smart. He falls in love. He falls in love with the girl, and he makes $50 million at the box office. And I thought, this is a job. I said, I have a group of friends. I can get a camera, and we could start making our own movies and our own videos, and that's what we started doing. And I made a YouTube channel, and some of them started to get a lot of views. And I was getting close to my senior year of high school, and my mom kept saying, you have to, what do you want to, have to go to college? What are you going to study? You have to major in something. And I said, well, there's nothing I can major in, comedy. I'm checking. I'm asking the guidance counselor at school, there's no comedy major, but I don't know what I'm interested in. And so I said, you know what? Well, maybe I can go to film school, and I'll learn how to make my own movie. And then, I'll graduate, and I'll just make my own movies with my friends. That was my plan. Right. So I applied. I did 2 years film school at Temple University in Philadelphia. And then I really always wanted to go to NYU Tisch. But I didn't apply coming out of high school. I thought, my grades weren't, up to par. And I remember in my sophomore year at Temple, I said, let me try to apply as a transfer student. Just see if I get in, I'll figure it out from there if I even get accepted. So I put together a portfolio packet, and there was actually, you had to submit a short film or a short documentary. I made this documentary with family friends of mine who were survivors of the Holocaust. It was, an older man and his wife, and the man is no longer here, Olav Shalom, but they have an unbelievable story. And I really just set up a camera and I asked them if they could just tell their story and why they're so happy. That was like the question I asked them. I had other questions to ask, and they spoke for 3 hours. And they had such an inspiring message. And I just remember cutting up, this one question from that one question, 3 minutes, and made it into a short documentary. And I put that into portfolio packet, and I got accepted at NYU.
That's awesome. Wow.
Yeah. And so one of the professors I had later when I was there, when I actually decided to go, told me, she said, it was that documentary that got you in. Everybody who watched it in the room was, crying, and we're like, we have to accept this person.
Do you still, is that still online?
I think it's still online. If you type in my name and you type in Holocaust afterwards.
If I find the link, I'll put it in the description so people could check it out.
You should. I think you should be able to find it. You should be able to find it.
Okay, cool.
Especially if you send it to him, Ari.
Yes, I will. I will do my best to send it.
We'll be right back to this episode of Meaningful People.
Right back. Right back.
I missed that.
Do you though?
Yeah.
It'll be right back.
I'm sleeping and I wake up and I hear, go right back to sleep. I'm going to start that with my daughter. Go right back. Anyways, you need to
Let me know how that works out for you.
Probably not going to be well. Let My Nation Go. A book by Feldheim, authored by Yosef Deutsch.
Gewalt.
What a novel.
From my Let My Nation series.
It's a Let My Nation series.
It is.
And it's an unbelievable, beautiful masterpiece. It reads like a novel, yet informs and inspires like a sefer.
Exactly. It's like a historical novel that takes place in the context of Yetzias Mitzrayim.
It's unbelievable.
It's amazing prep for Pesach.
I have this in my home. I go through it, and my daughter looks at the pictures, and I kind of read the words, or maybe she reads the words. I look at the pictures. We're not judging anybody, whatever you do at your home. But you can get this in your home right now by heading to feldheim.com. Let My Nation MP, promo code.
Let My Nation MP.
Let My Nation MP. What does MP stand for?
I'm going to go with meaningful people.
Oh. Makes sense. You get 10% off and free shipping.
I think that was a genuine pause, people.
It was. Yeah.
It's that early for Nachi.
It's, yeah.
Good times. But what's cool about this particular time of the year is that the Parshias are dealing with Yetzias Mitzrayim, with the Exodus from Egypt, while at the same time, we're gearing up to start preparing for Pesach.
It's a must.
So yeah, this is the time to get involved.
Feldheim.com. Let My Nation Go. Promo code Let My Nation MP. You could try to figure out what MP stands for. He says meaningful people. It could be something else. I don't know. 10% off, free shipping. Go get it. And now back to this episode. So you want to be Adam Sandler. You're going for this Hollywood career, make $50 million. I guess in that point, what's the next step? You get into NYU. You're learning filmmaking. What's the next step for you?
I'm at NYU. I'm studying film, and there's at NYU they have like a wall where they have a lot of the famous people who wound up becoming famous who studied there. So one of the professors told me, he said, that Adam Sandler went here when he was 18 years old. He also went to NYU. And he said, that when he was studying at NYU, he started doing stand-up comedy. And so I know you're doing YouTube videos and you're studying filmmaking, but maybe you could start doing stand-up. So I gave it a shot. I started doing stand-up at different comedy clubs in Manhattan. A comedy club in particular called Comic Strip Live. And I remember when I started performing there, they have a huge wall, again, of everybody who performed at this comedy club who wound up becoming famous. And there's their young picture of Adam Sandler. So I really felt like I was really walking in his, in his footsteps. And I had an opportunity while I was in, I think my junior year, or getting into my senior year, to be an intern at late night with Jimmy Fallon on NBC. And I was so excited. They selected like 20 interns from across the country.
Yeah. That's a pretty big deal.
They accepted 20 interns from across the country, and I was one of them.
Wow.
And they told us the first day, you get to NBC Rockefeller Center, and they say, welcome. We're all excited. Everybody's glowing, smiling, so happy to be there. You have this badge that you can show security to get up into the offices, and they tell you, welcome. But you should know the first rule here is that you can't talk to Jimmy Fallon. or the producers. So I looked around, like, that's why all of us applied, I think.
Can you imagine?
It's literally why we're here.
That's literally the rule. You can't talk to them.
Yeah. So there's times where, I definitely don't listen to rules. And I said, I'm not listening to this one. I'm going to talk to Jimmy Fallon. They wanted us to get, people's lunches, pick up, if run errands, dry clean. You hear these stories, you're like a paid gopher. Right. But except as an intern, you don't get paid. There's no payment. You're getting college credits and you're getting the experience, which is an unbelievable, thing in and of itself. But to be told that you can't talk to, the host of the show. And by the way, Jimmy himself was very approachable. Like, he had come in and said hi to all of us, that day. We were like, he seems to be wanting to talk to us. But I remember going over to him and to some of the producers, and I would tell them I'm a comedian and I do stand-up and I have YouTube videos. At that point, some of them were even getting millions of views on YouTube, and they started to use me as one of the stand-ins in rehearsal. So none of the shows are live. I say that for the people that still think some of these things are live. I guess a lot of people started to catch on. They're not live anymore. But
by the way, the Jewish charity campaign shows are also not live, just in case anyone's wondering. And neither is this. Neither is this.
The button that says live over here is not real?
No, it's fake. It's fake.
Okay. So I started to rehearse with Jimmy in the rehearsals that, there could be sometimes 5-6 rehearsals before they actually tape the show at around 5-6 o'clock. And then I was really around celebrities because, I'm backstage and the celebrities also show up, early to also try to rehearse things, different sketches, different bits. And I really felt at that point like, wow, I'm really on my way to being famous. Right. And then that internship ended and I had another opportunity to work at Comedy Central, the Daily Show with Jon Stewart. Sometimes I date myself when I say that name, but for those of you who don't know, he had a political satire late night comedy show, and I was really excited to be there. Once again, they selected about 20 or 25 interns from across the country that applied, and they didn't tell us.
For those that know Jon Stewart. And for those that don't know, anyone that you know of today in that like political satire, late night genre are all of his Talmidim.
Exactly. It's the whole, Trevor Noah, big anti-Semite Trevor Noah. But
shout out Trevor.
Yeah. But yeah, you're right. It's all stemming from John's political satire. And I thought that he was a very witty, funny person, and I really wanted to talk to him while I was there, but you couldn't get a word in, really. He was very hands-on with the show, which is a good thing. He was in almost every meeting he wanted to be in, from beginning to end. Even once the show taped, he was sitting with the editors and, helping decide last-minute decisions, which was, now that, coming from after working at, the Late Late Show with James Corden or whatever, I realized that not many people do that. They tape, they leave. And so he was very hands-on, and I think that definitely played a role in why the show was so successful. And so the last day or the last week, he gave the interns an opportunity for a Q&A. We could ask him anything we wanted. We could ask him, some of the head writer and executive producer. And I remember thinking, wow, this is my chance. Like anything that I've wanted to ask thus far, here's the time. And I knew I was only going to get probably like one question in. They're going to go around the room. They can't sit here for hours on end. So
and you weren't getting a 3-hour answer to your 1 3-minute question.
Yeah. So when it got to my turn, I just asked them, I said, what advice would you give a young comedian like me? I'm about to graduate soon. This is the year 2012. That was the year I graduated. And I said, I want to be famous like you. I want to be a famous comedian. What advice do you have? And, he paused and he looked around to everybody in the room and he looked back at me and he said, the only way to succeed in life is to not have a plan B. And then he repeated it again. The only way to succeed in life is to not have a plan B. And you know, like when you hear like advice or you hear like a motto or a phrase, and you've heard that phrase before. It's not like a new phrase, no plan B. Everybody's heard of it. It's, you know, I'm sure it's like bumper stickers, t-shirts. We've all heard no plan B. But sometimes when you hear advice from somebody that, you know, you look up to so much, you're like, oh, wow, like now it really clicks. Wow. So I asked him to elaborate. Why exactly that piece of advice? What is it about that? And so he said, you know, when I was younger, I told my mom and my dad I want to be a famous comedian, and you know, like a nice Jewish mother. He said my mom was like so distraught. Like, what are you doing, John? Be a doctor, be a lawyer. What do you mean? Like, everybody wants to be famous. What are you doing? And he said, no, don't worry. I'm really going to be famous. And she said, okay, sure. And, you know, he moved to Manhattan and, you know, he's doing stand-up comedy. And, you know, these stories, you're living in like a, you know, small apartment, sleeping on a mattress that doesn't even have, the box beneath it, and you can reach the toilet from over here. And, you know, he said, you know, I was doing that for years and, you know, trying to perform in stand-up comedy clubs, get my name out there, but it wasn't working. And eventually, someone scouted me from MTV. And it was because of this mantra, no plan B. And I got my first opportunity. He had a show before The Daily Show. I think it had a very short shelf life. I forget the name of it, but it got canceled. And then he said, no plan B again. And then he got offered, you know, another opportunity to have The Daily Show. And then the show started winning Emmys year after year, and it became what it did. And he said it was because of this mantra, no plan B.
It's funny. I heard recently, you know, they say Chachma B'Goyim. Jon Stewart happens to be Jewish.
Yeah.
But just that piece of advice, I heard that when Yaakov Avinu was holding on tight to Binyamin and wouldn't let him down to Mitzrayim, so first Reuven tried giving that guarantee, saying, oh, I promise I'll bring him back, and he offered collateral just in case anything happens. You can have my first two born children. And Yaakov rejected that guarantee, and he said, no, I'm not parting with Binyamin. And then when Yehuda said, I'm bringing him back, guaranteed, and didn't even offer collateral, then Yaakov Avinu said, okay. And I think that the Pashup shot is exactly like you're saying, that Reuven was contemplating the plan B. Like, what's going to happen? Yeah. I'll give collateral. I'll give this instead. But Yehuda, there is no failure. There is no plan B. I'm bringing Binyamin back, period. There is no plan B. There's no contingency. And that guarantee resonated with Yaakov. Wow.
It's definitely true. It's when you set your mind to something, if you already have in the back of your mind that, well, if it doesn't work out, then this. So you already are not giving it your all because you have that fallback.
Yeah. If I can use this opportunity just to share very quickly.
Sure.
I heard from Reb Chaim Baruch Rubin in Los Angeles. He was speaking on Shabbos Chanukah when he has yahrzeit for his son Moshe Rubin, and he spoke beautifully about this inyan. And he said an alternative pshat. He said Reuven was saying to Yaakov, "I'll bring back Binyamin guaranteed, and you can have my children as collateral." And that he rejected. Yaakov Avinu didn't take that guarantee. Yehuda, who knew the pain of losing children, Yehuda had lost Erev Einan, his two sons, and he looked his father in the eye. He says, "I know that pain of what it feels like to lose a child, and I'm not going to subject you to that pain." And Yaakov took that guarantee from someone who can relate to that pain. It therefore resonated with him.
Wow.
That's special. That's beautiful. Wow. So, you know, Ari, you're working through the industry. You're at Fallon, then Stewart, and I think then you said you went on to James Corden. And I imagine that your Judaism at that point took a back seat.
Yeah, for sure. It had already taken, that back seat when I was in high school after I made, my friends. But at this point, for sure, in college, when I was in college, I maybe went to, Hillel on campus like once or twice. I was really focused on my studies. I did not party. I did not, do anything, somewhat, social, in terms of like the Jewish, activities on campus.
Right.
But for sure, I was focused on this one thing. I just want to be famous, and I want to make people laugh, and I want to make movies. And it wasn't even so much really that I wanted to, make the money. I really enjoyed making people laugh. The money was for sure a thing that famous people, they become rich people. But I had a passion for making, people smile and laugh, and making these YouTube videos. I made a lot of social experiments. I was into, just making people, laugh. So I wound up moving to Los Angeles after college, about a year or so. I tried making it work in New York. It wasn't working. I wasn't landing any, jobs in the industry. So I packed up my car and I took a road trip with one of my friends from college. His name is Chris. Shout out to Chris.
How are you, dude?
What?
Just saying, how are you, dude, to Chris?
Oh, yeah.
It's my thing.
Chris, one of them was ticks.
Yeah.
Chris is he's doing good. He's working at the Late Late Show now.
Oh, really? Nice.
Yeah. And so we made up this, this plan. We're moving out to LA, and no plan B. We took a 10-day road trip across the country, which I recommend anybody do. If you have the time ever. There's so much to see. It was unbelievable. We went to Savannah, Georgia, which is a beautiful town. We drove down up through the Florida Panhandle. We made it a point. We wanted to see if we could get across the country without sleeping in hotels and just like meeting people. Either we had a friend or we would meet somebody, and we wound up sleeping in some random guy's backyard in New Orleans one night.
You're very Ari. You're very Jewish.
Yeah.
And very safe.
Yes.
We went to an alligator ranch in Louisiana.
Good.
And
Did
then
you sleep there also?
We did not sleep there, although I
That was the
wrangled
night we
an
did not
alligator.
sleep.
I wrangled an alligator. I tell my wife all the time. She doesn't really fully believe me. And I even tell my daughter, who's 4 now, that Abba knows how to catch an alligator. I'm telling you, I know how. I could do it. And that was my time to shine at that alligator ranch.
Ari, that alligator could have possibly been the result of one of those eggs that hatched when you were a child. And
Very deep.
It could have been like
Very deep.
It could have been the alligator's like, you know what? I'm gonna let him wrangle me because he raised me.
I have a connection to them, but it was a geschmack. It was a fun trip across the country, and there I wound up. You get to LA and the Hollywood sign. As we started off with, you take a picture with the Hollywood sign. And I'm telling you right now, if I could have, touched the letters, and I hear there's people who somehow climb over and do that, I really would have. I was so excited to be in Los Angeles and in Hollywood, and to be famous. And I had, no doubt in my mind that was going to happen. And I was sleeping on my friend's couch for, a few months. Me, Chris, a friend of ours who had already moved out there. And I was sleeping, on one of these like L-shaped couches. Here I was, here's Chris. And then there was like a dog named Bugsy sleeping next to us. And
Bugsy.
How are you, dude, Bugsy?
Very deep.
How are you,
Not
Bugsy?
getting in on the action there.
Yeah, it's contagious.
and I was performing in comedy clubs and trying to introduce myself. I have this theory. Tell me if you've ever, if you agreed with this. You're from LA, Mo. I think that everybody in LA at one point tried to be famous or wants to be famous. Like you can go up to really anyone. Like you could be, in the Ralph's checkout, and you ask them like, "Hey, you look a little familiar. Have I seen you?" Oh yeah, actually, I did and then you ask them like, "Do you have any connections?" I know a guy who knows a guy, and so I was taking any lead I could. I just, whatever.
I'll weigh in on the question because you prompted me to.
Yeah.
I think that everyone that grows up in LA has a strong response to the inyan of being famous or show business. Either they're seeking it, or they have a repulsive response where they like want to avoid it or they're turned off by it. But no one's like indifferent.
Well, you're
to the
famous.
industry.
You're famous now, Momo.
Like it permeates the entire neighborhood.
I agree.
It's everywhere. You can't get away from it. It's everywhere.
It's all over. It's it's a beautiful community, Hancock Park and Pico, in the middle of a jungle. But there are for sure beautiful families and an unbelievable Makom Torah, which is unbelievable how it's thriving in this environment. Shout out to the LA community that's able to hold it down. But I had no idea that there was this community. Once again, I got there and I just wanted to be famous.
Right.
And so
you were shopping at Ralph's, right? You were shopping at Ralph's, you said?
Shopping at Ralph's. Chris and I were going to Ralph's, and we wound up getting an apartment. We got our own apartment in Burbank near the studios. And I got a phone call from a friend of mine who I went to college with. And she told me, she's from LA. She went to NYU with me. And I had a professor in college who told us at one point, he said, look around the room right now. I know that a lot of you think that you're gonna, graduate and then show people a certificate that you went to NYU, your degree, and then they're just gonna say, oh wow, welcome, yeah, let's hire you. Here's a job. He said it doesn't really work like that. The people in this room right now are the people that will hire you, and so you need to make the connections while you're in college, in school right now. And it's so true about how, who you know. And obviously it's about what you know too. You can't sustain the job if you don't know how to operate, the camera or to write the script or, to whatever it is. But to get your foot in the door, it's really who you know. And so she called me and she said, you
mentioned who you know, and you mentioned shopping at Ralph's. I want to clarify for our East Coast listeners. Ralph's is the name of a grocery store. It's not a guy, Ralph.
I thought it was Ralph Hertzka.
Like legit. When I was engaged, my wife and I were in Los Angeles, and I kept on saying oh, I'm gonna go run out and get something from Ralph's, and then the next day my mother's like, oh, we need some more thing. I'll go to Ralph's, and my wife's like, who's this guy Ralph that's hooking everyone up?
Ralph's is a great place. I prefer it over Trader Joe's. I know my wife, she's gonna, adamantly disagree, but Ralph's has everything. I think it has everything you need. Trader Joe's is also great, but there I was, and I got this phone call from my friend. Her name is Natalie, and she called me and she said, I'm working for CBS, and I am the production manager for one of the new late night shows. And would you like a job? So I said, okay, what's the show? Who is it? She says, oh, it's somebody. His name's James Corden. He's taking over for someone named Craig Ferguson, who also, I'm sure not many people know who he was. But I said, who's James Corden? Mind you, this is the inception of the show.
Right.
And so she said, I don't really know who he is. I mean, I looked him up. He's famous in the UK. And he won a Tony Award on Broadway. James has an unbelievable voice. He really can sing. And
for those in the film community that maybe don't know, Carpool Karaoke. I think that's the most notable.
Carpool Karaoke.
That's he is the creator. His team is the creator of Carpool Karaoke, which has been knocked off by many different Jewish people. Also doing Carpool Karaoke.
Right, but he also took a spot on late night that historically was the throwaway after the actual late night show. And he took that spot and just brought it into the spotlight in a way that I think no other late night host did.
Yeah,
right?
That's for sure. The team that is working on the show are for sure some of the best. James himself is a super talented actor and comedian. And they really put together a whole group of people that made, even though it was coming on at 12:34 at night, at 12:34 a.m., it was, competing. We won Emmys with the show, within, the second year there. And it was competing with all the other, top late night shows that were on beforehand. And
had
also
a lot higher
on
budgets,
YouTube too,
imagine.
it was massive.
Right, yeah. And it still is, to be honest, even though he's not so loved in the press anymore.
Yeah. I don't keep up with that. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but
we'll speak.
Okay.
But
you'll
no, he just basically he was basically outed as being just a not nice guy. Like he was at a restaurant he was at a restaurant and he was nasty to the waiting staff, and the restaurant banned him for life at the restaurant. And just, how like these stories come out. So they just they said, oh, he's just not a nice person. Same thing happens with other people. I don't know if he isn't, but that's the word. That's my neighbor told me that.
Who knows?
My neighbor told me.
Who knows? Who knows?
Yeah. But yeah.
So I took the job. I was excited. I said, sure, I'll take the job. I'm hired as a production assistant. It's a paid gopher. This time I'm getting paid. I remember calling back my family. I said, I told my mom, I got this job at CBS. I called my bubby. I told her, all of a shalom. I said, bubby, I got a job at CBS. She thought I worked at CVS for, 2.5 years. Like, I didn't know that the pharmacy had a TV show. After a few conversations, I stopped, You
told her, no, it does. The monitor that you walk in CVS, they turn that into a TV show.
Yeah. So there I was. And once again, I'm on the bottom of the totem pole, getting coffees, getting people's lunches, and I do what, I did before. I told them, I'm a comedian myself. I'm sending them my YouTube videos. I have access to their emails and their phone numbers. I don't know if you want to give that out to somebody like me.
Right.
What's the worst that's going to happen? So they'll fire me. So no plan B's in the back of my mind. That's the driving force that's running the engine. And here I am. I have this badge. You get on the CBS lot. And so I'm sending them my videos, and they're telling me politely, the producers, we have writers, we have producers, we don't need you doing that right now. Keep doing what you're doing. And I'm not stopping. Another week goes by, another this, another that. I was putting out a YouTube video every Monday night. And so I was, pushing out like a lot of content on my channel, and it had, thousands of followers, and I had people following on Instagram, this and that. And I remember making a video, and this particular video was the one that got me my first promotion at the show. I made a video, these selfie sticks, that people, it's not enough that, they do this. They gotta go like that. I need to get more in the background. So I said, what if I could make the world's most extreme selfie stick? So how do you do that? How does one do that? So I went to Home Depot and I bought one of these, extension poles that you would use to paint like a cathedral ceiling. And like I said, I was really into these social experiments, hitting camera, what would you do moments. And so I mounted a GoPro to the end of one of these extension poles, and it extends 50 feet.
Nice.
So then I was walking around Hollywood Boulevard screaming can you get out of my selfie? And have hundreds of people trying to shift out the sidewalk, and I was pushing it through traffic, touching the lights, the traffic lights, and I took it to Venice Beach. It was the whole thing. Wow. And these are the videos that get millions of views on YouTube. And I sent this in. I said, what if James himself can take the world's biggest selfie with the most amount of celebrities or something? And so James himself came over to me and he watched it and he said, Ari, it's very funny. And he said, we have to do it. We never actually did it on the show, but I got a promotion. That's when I started producing, helping to produce the Carpool Karaokes.
Wow, that's awesome. That's pretty cool. And those who don't know should know that he's not actually driving the car in Carpool Karaoke. That was exposed a couple of years ago.
Well, when I was there, we always drove. I was one of the people.
His car. You're one of the people that said, it has to be on a flatbed?
I was one of the people that suggested it because it's not safe.
Right.
When he started doing the flatbed thing, which somebody told me, I didn't do much research into it, if they continued doing it or what, but when he started doing it, I'm sure it was coming from the safety perspective, because when we were there, the way it worked is I was always behind him. And then there was 7 cars of the entourage of the celebrity, behind me. My car was always behind James, and I had a whole view of all the 16 different GoPro shots. We had a whole earpiece in his ear that he could hear us. We could talk to him with the walkie-talkie, and then there was a car in front of James too, which was kind of trying to lead the way. So we were sandwiching them in, but paparazzi chases you. It's a whole thing,
right?
And it gets
it's a liability nightmare.
Yeah, it's very dangerous. The paparazzi really don't care if they hit you, just for that one shot. And so I think that's maybe why they put it on the flatbed. I'm not sure. But every time I was there, I can, testify, we drove, even though I don't think we should have.
No, I hear you. We'll be right back to this episode of Meaningful People. We're going to give a big shout out to our friend. I need a different word for shout out, but we'll give a big mention to our friend, Moshe Alpert.
Give a big mention, dude.
I'm mentioning you, Moshe Alpert, because if you need to get your money in order, let's say you want to be advised on your financials, which is a nicer way of saying financial advice, because everyone needs advice. Some people need financial advice, and that could be you. And Moshe Alpert is a killer when it comes to the finances. So
killer in like a good way.
He's not going to kill your bank. He's going to kill your expenses.
Killer with like a very positive connotation.
Exactly. You need to reach out to alpertmoshe@gmail.com. That's alpertmoshe@gmail.com. And he can take care of you. Your ticket, your window to financial security, to financial bliss.
Interesting.
Is through Moshe Alpert.
Do you know his cell number by any chance?
I don't know. Does it start with a 718?
It really does.
And what does it go on with?
718-644-1594.
So if you want to call him, just call that number or email him at alpertmoshe@gmail.com.
Here's that number one more time. 718-644-1594. Strong number,
Turn
Moshe.
that into a jingle. And also a big mention to our friends of ILS.
To infinity and beyond.
Infinity Land Services, because when you need your title and you need it now, who do you call? Infinity Land Services. I'm going to get sued by that company that made that song.
I don't think you will, because it was unrecognizable from the original.
Obviously.
That's how good that sounds.
That's how good it was. Well, you need to reach out to Infinity Land Services, ilstitle.com, because you need title, and you don't want the horror stories. You don't want the headache. You don't want the hecher. Didn't fit there? The lagutz.
You don't want lachats.
Lachats.
You don't want lachats when it comes to title.
No, that's the one thing you don't want. That should be their next ad.
What you want to do is you want to go to infinity and beyond.
Infinity Land Services, ilstitle.com. Hit the link in the description and reach out to them.
Avoid the lachats.
No lachats, only hecher. Enjoy the rest of this episode. So, I guess take us through the landing phase of your career in the industry, and then you're in the Mir now. So how'd that happen?
That's a great question. It was a long process. Really, when I was there at the show, I started to realize the more I was working around celebrities, that they really weren't the people that I thought that they would have been. They weren't as happy as I thought that they would have been. And there were multiple times where I started to really contemplate myself. If I became famous, would this be me? If I became famous, would I have, such an ego? All the things that we hear in the tabloids, but we turn ahead to it and we still think that they're living happy lives. I started to think to myself, I tell people all the time, like, for example, people on Instagram, you have like, a husband and wife or a girlfriend and a boyfriend on Instagram, and they can broadcast. People can broadcast nowadays whatever life they want to portray by taking whatever picture they want to show to their followers, and they can make you think that that's the life that they're living. But behind closed doors, it's not always like that. We all know that. There's never a time where like a husband's in the middle of like a fight with his wife, or a boyfriend and a girlfriend are fighting and they like take a picture of this and, post this. Like, it's not happening. But we see the celebrities in the limelight where they're in the movies and when they're in, the TV shows and they're at the awards. And then, of course, we see the tabloid pictures where the paparazzi catches them in these moments. But we turn ahead to that. I myself, at the time, I was doing that, where I just thought, that's not really them, that's them. They're really these happy people. But when you see them behind closed doors, and when you see how really miserable almost all of them are, and really all of them are, and you see the portrayal of what their life really is, that the everyday person doesn't get to see, you start to take a step back and realize, wait a second, if I continue down this path, that's probably going to be me. How am I going to, stand up to pressures of a manager or a publicist telling me to do this, do that? When I don't want to do it, how am I going to be able to say no? You sign contracts, you're obligated to do things. You're not making decisions for yourself. You're making decisions because other people are, or the pressures. And I started to think, even in my own life, how many decisions am I making that I consciously am making? Maybe I'm not even making my own decisions right now, and I'm not even famous. So I didn't know what to do with all these feelings and how I was feeling. But I was 26 years old at the time. And I said, let me go on a birthright trip. So I went on a birthright trip. I think they cut it at 26 is the cap off. You can't go on the free trip anymore. And so I said, let me go. I never went to Israel before. And so I went on this trip, and it was a fun trip. They took us, they gave us the itinerary beforehand. So I got to see all the activities we're going to do. So it was, hiking Masada at sunrise, going to the Dead Sea, camel riding, sleeping in Bedouin tents. That wasn't, my favorite part of the trip, but, it was fun. And they have this phrase, save the best for last. So I remember looking at the itinerary before I left to go on the trip, and I saw that the last thing we were doing, it said Western Wall, a day at the Western Wall or a time at the Western Wall, whatever it said. And I didn't really know what the Western Wall was. I knew there was a Western Wall. I didn't know what it represented, what it stood for, what connection it had to me and the Jewish people. But I asked the Chabad rabbi in Los Angeles before I left that I had gone to for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, the high holidays. And I had somewhat of a connection to him. I asked him if I could borrow a pair of tefillin. I hadn't put on tefillin since I was 13. So he gave me this pair of tefillin to take with me on the trip, and I thought maybe I'll put it on at some point when I'm in Israel, and I saved it for that last day. So I got to the Western Wall, and our tour guide, his name was Stav. He told us actually the first day, my name is Stav. I'm an atheist, but I will show you the land of Israel. And,
That's awesome.
He really lived up to that. There was nothing connected to any, Yiddishkeit, Torah. It was all activity. It was just fun, but I was missing that. And the last day, he said, you can all get off the bus and go see the Western Wall. He said it's a holy site, a holy Jewish site. He didn't really tell us anything about it. Maybe he said it was something to do with the temple. I didn't hear it if he did, but I went there and I walked up to the Western Wall, to the Kaisal, and I was trying to remember, do I put the tefillin on this arm or this arm? How many times do I wrap it? And do I wrap it this way, that way? And I couldn't remember. And I just broke down crying. And I wasn't crying because I couldn't remember how to put on the tefillin, because I was 26. It had been 13 years since I had put on tefillin. And I don't even know if I did it right back then either. But I was crying because I remember looking to my left and to my right, and I saw other men around me, and some of them were crying, not all of them, but they all had one thing in common. They all looked like they knew what this place was, and I didn't. And I was embarrassed. And I thought, how could it be that I'm 26 years old and I don't know what this wall represents? And I didn't know what to do. If I would have turned around and just looked behind me, I maybe would have saw Aisha Torah, Yeah. But at the time, I'm telling you honestly, I didn't even know there was such a thing as a Baal Tshuva. I didn't know that there was. I thought, you were either religious or not religious. I didn't know I could then become religious and how to go about it. But I remember calling my mom that night, from the hotel, and I told my mom, I'm staying here in Israel, and I'm not going back to the Late Late Show. I'm not going back to Los Angeles. I'm staying here. I felt something so real today, and I have to see what it was. And she, my mom being the amazing mom that she is, she told me something. She said, Ari, you can't make decisions in life when you're emotional. You have to make decisions, especially a big life decision like staying in another country and leaving a job. You have to make decisions from an intellectual standpoint. And right now you're definitely emotional on the phone, which I was. And she said, if it's meant to be that you'll get back to Israel one day, you'll get back there, but now's not the time to do it. So she was right. And I listened to her and I went back to the Late Late Show. And I didn't know where to turn to. Like I had no idea that Hancock Park, for those of you who don't know, it's one of the main from communities in Los Angeles, and it's right next to CBS on Beverly and Fairfax, I had no idea. I was driving through the Frum community. Like, there's Rabbi Bess's shul. There's the, the kollel on my left. There's from people eating at Fish Grill. I didn't see any of these things. I want
to highlight for people that think like this is an exaggeration. The CBS studio where the Late Show with James Corden, where it films, is literally down the street.
Yes.
Down Beverly Boulevard from where Ari's describing these shuls and the kollel. If you pay attention on Carpool Karaoke, you can sometimes see the kollel and Rabbi Bess's shul.
Yeah,
because of how many times you've driven down Beverly Boulevard while filming. It's unbelievable.
Sometimes we're so close but so far,
It's so true, Nachi. I can't, looking back, the only thing I could come up with in my mind is, even though I was driving down that street and I was passing all of these places and all of these opportunities at the time, for me to grow, for me to get introduced to Yiddishkeit in a real Torah way, that's not what I was looking for at that time. I was looking, up at the billboards. I wanted to see my name in, the bright lights. And I was fixated on that.
Hashem shows you what you're looking for, almost, sort of.
Yeah.
Hashem is your shadow.
And so that's what I was seeing. And now when I got back from this trip, I started to notice it a little bit more. Like, oh, wait a second, like there's a Jewish community here. I didn't know how big it was at the time. And I got introduced to a certain rabbi who was working for a kiruv organization called LAJ. LAJ is an unbelievable organization run by Rabbi Alex Landa, who was my Masada Kedushin at my wedding, and Rebbitzin Landa, and their Mamish Meiser Nefesh. They won't say that, but I will say it. And their kids too, they're unbelievable family. What they do, they take young Jewish professionals on trips to Israel and on a trip to Poland, and they learn with you 10 weeks before you go on the trip, Sunday classes. And I started learning with a rabbi who was working for the organization at the time, Rabbi Eden Markowitz. Shout out to Rabbi Eden, who's now in Dallas, Texas. And he called me and he said, I got your number from Rabbi Landa. And, Rabbi Landa said, you're looking to learn with somebody and I would love to learn with you. And I was actually really scared when he said that on the phone. I said, I was thinking to myself, what are we going to learn? I went to college, maybe you want to learn with me. I don't know what we're learning. And I said, he said, well, we'll meet up at a coffee shop, we'll learn. And I was really intimidated by that. I thought, wait a second, what if I meet with him and it's uncomfortable and I don't like it? And then I'm locked into this, coffee being a 45-minute session and I have no way to get out. So I offered up to him, I said, why don't we meet on my lunch break at CBS and I'll get you a visitor's pass onto the lot. And as soon as I said that, he said, how many Jews work at your show? And I said, yeah, pretty much everybody. And he said, sure, let's meet there. So we met and I thought there was, less pressure now. I can meet him on my lunch break. I have a walkie-talkie. I could, I could hit the beeper on the side and pretend I got paged. I have to go back. And he came.
That was a little plan B right there.
Yeah, there you go. I was already not fully committed. But I remember he came, no books, no svarim, just he himself, and we just schmoozed. We just talked. He told me about his life. I told him about my life. And I remember he told me afterwards, I enjoyed it so much. I went overtime into my, after my, my lunch break, and I was really having a good time with him, just talking. And he said, look, I really want to learn with you. And I didn't know what that entailed at the time. But he told me, look, there's just one condition. We have to make a Seder. And I told him, I know about a Seder. My family did a Passover Seder growing up. And he said, no, there's a learning Seder. And he explained to me, it's very important if anybody wants to grow in Torah, that you have a set time, set day, and you keep plugging away. And that's how you grow. That's how you shtag. And so I said, okay, fine. How about Monday nights? 7:30 when I get out of work. I was working 12-hour days at the show. And he said, great. I would go to his house every Monday night. And we just started learning, about Shabbos. And I remember we started learning Mesilas Yesharim, and I enjoyed it so much that I was going Monday nights, Tuesday nights. Anytime I could get, I was going to his house for Shabbos. I would go over for Shabbos, and I wasn't keeping Shabbos at the time, but I definitely was growing and wanting to take on things and feeling more when I was at work at CBS, like I just wanted to be at Rabbi Markowitz's house learning. And I met my wife at that time. She was an actress in the industry since she was 8 years old. Her parents got her into acting. She grew up in Los Angeles, and she was in movies and TV shows. And she had also been on a birthright trip around the same time as me, different trips, but same time. And I told her, I said, I'm learning with this rabbi, maybe you want to come for Shabbos, and maybe you want to meet, his wife, the Rebbitzin. They have this organization that Rabbi Landa runs where they take trips to Israel. It's mixed, boys, girls. And we both started getting involved with this organization. And I remember actually thinking, I'll tell you this is a true story. It's unbelievable. I told Rabbi Landa at the time, there's no way I'm going to be able to go with you. I can learn with you while you're here in LA, but I can't go to another trip to Israel because work just gave me off 10 days just a few months prior to go on birthright. And now I'm going to ask them for 15 days off to go with LAJ to Israel again. They're going to think I'm crazy. And at that point in my life, I wasn't ready to leave the industry just yet. But I remember thinking, it's not going to work. I can't go in and ask my boss for another 15 days off. And that week I went in when I had to really make the decision of whether or not I was going to sign up to go or not before they were going to give my spot away. And they gathered everybody in the office together, and they told us that James booked a role in a movie that summer. And he was going to be taping from this date to that date. And they were the exact, I kid you not, the exact same dates that LAJ was going to Israel.
Wow.
And
I
remember
got James. They got James that. They got James that role so you could go to Israel.
There you go. That's for sure.
Wow.
I remember calling back, Rabbi Markowitz and, Rabbi Landa and saying like, what a coincidence. Like James is taping, and they were like, whoa, there's no coincidences. Like you are meant to go on this trip, and your girlfriend who, wound up becoming my wife, she is also meant to go on it with you. And we went on this journey together. It was 10 weeks prior of learning on Sundays. We weren't like learning Gemara or anything. It was just like really Rabbi Landa just probing us with certain topics that, young Jewish professionals who didn't grow up with a Torah background had certain opinions on it. And then we would see what the Torah's perspective was on marriage. Why is it that, the divorce rate, especially in Los Angeles and in Hollywood, is the way that it is? What's their view on marriage versus the Torah's view? Why is it that Jews are, the most hated people in the world? Why is that? And why has it always been like that? And there were heated debates this way, that way. And we went on Shabbatones. I spent my first real Shabbos in Hancock Park and then in Valley Village, another community in Los Angeles. And then the culmination was you got to go on this trip, which was an unbelievable trip because we did everything that Birthright did, all the fun activities. We hiked Masada, went to the Dead Sea. Like we did all these things, camel riding, ate falafel, shawarma, except everything that we did, Rabbi Landa had a way of connecting it back to a Torah concept. So you found meaning and you found something spiritual in the physical, which is really what we're here to do. We're here to fuse the two worlds. We live in a physical world, but we're supposed to make things, have that, find the ruchnius inside of it and have the spiritual content and bring that out. And so that's what he did. And it was really inspiring how he was able to do it on every activity. For example, one time we went rappelling down a mountain. I don't know if you've ever been rappelling before.
I have not.
I'm very scared of heights, so I was not looking forward to that activity. But after watching every guy on the trip do it and every girl on the trip do it, and even Rabbi Landa's a little 6-year-old boy, rappelled down this mountain, I was like, okay, I have to do this, So they tie this rope to, this little harness around you. And then, at least this is how they did it with us. They tied it around this really thin tree. And then you have like this, retired IDF soldier screaming at you like, "Yalla, go, you baby!" I'm like, okay, I'll go on my own terms. Like, hold on. And the way that you walk down the mountain, the way that you have to walk down the mountain is you have to walk completely sideways down the mountain, because if not, if you do what the natural instinct is to, choke up and not want to let go and lean back, then you fall and then you get scratched up. So it's a very awkward way to walk. That's not how we walk. Now, we don't walk like that on a daily basis. Right. So it's scary. So I rappelled down the mountain. I was fine. Everything was good. And afterwards, I told everybody, there's no way that Rabbi Landa just brought us rappelling to say, now, wasn't that fun? Let's go get shawarma now. Like, he's going to somehow connect this back to Torah. I just didn't know how. And he gathered us all around. There was about 25, 30 of us there. And he said, how did it feel when you were rappelling today? And so some people started to raise their hands and they were like, it was scary. And he's like, great. Other people raised their hand and they were like, it wasn't normal to walk like that. He's like, perfect. I raised my hand. I was like, I thought I was going to die. He's like, that's very dramatic, Ari, but that's also good. And then he said, this is exactly what I was looking for. Exactly what I was looking for. We're all wondering, like, where is he going with this? And he said, the exact feeling that you all felt today when you were rappelling down that mountain, that it was scary and it didn't feel normal to walk like that. And even what Ari said, that you felt like you were going to die. Those are the exact same feelings that you might feel when you are living a true Torah life in today's day and age. You might feel like at certain moments that this is not normal. I can't do this. Or it's scary. I can't take on that. There's no way. I can't do it. Or even like Ari said, like, Rabbi, I'm done. The Torah says that's it. I can't do it. I'm going to die. No more. The rest of the world's going out and doing this. The rest of the world dresses like that. They talk like this, whatever it might be. But he said, you have to know something. When you're living a true Torah life in today's day and age, the same way you didn't fall because that rope was tied to that tree, you'll never fall because Hashem's holding on to it. It's tied to the Torah. And needless to say, I was very inspired to hear this type of message time and time again. And they split the boys up at one point. They took the boys to learn for a day at Esha Torah, and then to Reb Berkowitz's Kollel, the Jerusalem Kollel. And they took the girls to Neve Yerushalyim, a seminary in Har Nof. And I remember actually that time walking into to the Jerusalem Kollel, we had like a Q&A with Reb Berkowitz, which was the coolest experience ever. I didn't know who he was at the time, but I remember Rabbi Landa told us, like, you are going to be speaking to one of the biggest, English-speaking rabbis, or one of the biggest rabbis in the world, period. And you can ask him anything you've ever wanted, like, make it a good question. And here you have people like asking him, like, Rav Berkowitz, how do you explain, if you say that the world is X amount of years old, how do you explain that dinosaur fossils have been, and here he goes into like unbelievable, like, with the biggest Rav Berkowitz smile that we all know, just like every question is so precious. And that was an experience. And also that was my first time getting paired up with an Avrich who I got to learn Gemara with. I had never learned Gemara before in my life. And so I was drawn into it, and I really made my mind up with my girlfriend at the time, at the end of that trip, that when we get back to LA, we had made up our minds that we don't want to work in the industry anymore. And we want to really, go down this path of really building a Torah, family. We wanted to get married at some point, which was not the traditional way of doing things, to get married and then go to yeshiva and then go to seminary. But that's what, we did. And we made up our minds that we were going to do that when we got back to LA.
Wow.
So that's where you are. That's where you are now. You're in the Mir. You're married, and you have kids, and you're living that Torah life every single day. It's an incredible journey.
It's striking to me the contrast of circumstances where you described where you had the opportunity to sit and ask any question of Jon Stewart, contrasted by the opportunity to sit with Harav Rav Berkowitz, and also ask any question that might have been on your mind. How different the trajectory of your life became in those two different circumstances. Unbelievable.
Yeah, it's, I thank Hashem every day that this is my life because I know what it could have become. And I know where it was heading. And had I not made the decision and Hashem put certain things in my life that I then acted on, Hashem puts things in our lives every day, sending us messages and little bits of inspiration here and there. It's what we do with it, where we take it. That's the most important thing. And so, Baruch Hashem, I was able to see those signs, take the inspiration, and try to do something. And it's a work in progress. I don't ever want people to think that chas v'shalom, like they're looking at someone who is made. It's definitely not true. We're all constantly working on ourselves until the day that we die. But it's a lifestyle that I don't ever look back on. People often ask me when I speak. I speak to schools and camps and all different places. Afterwards, when I do like a Q&A, I get people who say like, "Did you ever miss it? Do you ever look back?" And there's not a day in my life that I ever miss it, that I ever look back, that I ever think, that part of it was cool, that part of it was fun. I took the experiences from that world that I could take out. I think it's important when somebody, makes such a drastic change to not, flip out and completely excommunicate that whole past. There were certain things that I definitely learned, especially working in that industry that, I'm able even to, I think I'm a good Abba, my wife tells me I am. I try to be. You have a few kids, Baruch Hashem, Kanai Nahara, and you're trying to balance things. Being a parent, you have to be a director, you have to be a producer, you have to be able to, walk into your home, and that's real life producing. It's not fake. Hollywood's completely, it's the olam hasheker. Everything's fake. It's all fake. And when you're walking into, your home each day, and you get to come home, and say that I want to produce what goes on inside this home, and that's an unbelievable thing that you get to do, and you set the tone, as the parent to do that.
Ari Blau, I really thank you so much for giving us your time. I think this is very justly the longest episode of Meaningful People ever recorded. And
Interesting.
And it is worth every single second. Really, really appreciate it. You're a producer then, and you're a producer now as well. Although the difference is, like you said, you're producing something that's real, and the Grammys that you're going to win for this one, you can't even imagine. And it's a shame. So I really, really appreciate you telling us your story. Of course, we'll plug away how people can get in touch with you through your website, on the outro of this episode, and in the description and the show notes of this episode. But we really appreciate it, and I hope you could still make nights later at the Mir.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. And thank you to, all the listeners. And I hope that the message came across. And everybody should know that you're all out there, meaningful people. Everybody out there is, if you're living a Torah life in today's day and age and you're growing, you're meaningful. And
exactly.
The celebrities have nothing on you. I mean that. I've been there. I've seen them. Mamish nothing. You're all special. You're the real celebrities.
Gewalt.
Ari, thank you so much.
Thank you, Ari.
Thank you so much. All the best.
We had such a great time sitting down with Ari Blau.
Gewalt.
You're scratching your upper lip a lot. You okay? You have lice in there?
I'm good. No, I'm good.
We sat down with Ari Blau.
It's more of a gesture than anything.
And you know what? He had moments where he was actually really funny, and you could tell he has that potential. Like some of his bits, like he said, like the selfie stick thing, hilarious. Right?
Yeah. No, he's a comedic genius.
Yeah.
And here's a guy who he's seen it all. And he has made an incredibly informed decision to embrace Yiddishkeit, Torah, and just spirituality.
Unreal.
In a way that I think, we talk about it in some of the earlier episodes where when a person goes through that journey of becoming a Baal Tshuva, they get to make that decision for themselves in a way that a lot of times from people don't have that opportunity to make that conscious choice, because of the gift of growing up with a frum environment. And it is a gift, and of course that's unbelievable, and we have to cherish that upbringing. But listening to a story like Ari Blau, I think gives anyone that did have the opportunity to grow up from to really appreciate and cherish what they have, and anyone that has a similar story to him to really appreciate the journey that they've been on.
Absolutely.
'Cause everyone's on a journey.
Yeah.
We're all just at a different station.
Fire. That was a fire extinguisher noise, putting out the fire over here. And if you want to reach out to Ari and maybe have him come speak somewhere, go ahead. His contact info is in the description and the show notes. Reach out to him and let him know that you heard his episode of Meaningful People Podcast. Have a great week, everyone. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Hope you enjoyed this video from Meaningful Minute. We have so much more content for you. You may like this. You may like this. Take your pick. Let us know what you think.